Hello students, welcome to this video and brief discussion on summary practice in terms of reading using Murray's How Doctors Die as an example. First, as always, the task to summarize, the initial thing is always initially a reading task. You'll see in our course one of the main things that always starts is reading and thinking. From there, we can go to writing. So, as you approach Murray's essay, here are some tips that you can take with you that you can then use for all of the other things you have to read, not just for this class, but for most college tests that you will encounter. First, reading for the main idea. Reading to be able to summarize is both a mindset and a skill. In terms of mindset, try and think and ask yourself, what does the writer want you to understand about what you're reading? You can create three questions that will help you get to this mindset and help you understand what the author wants you as the reader to take away. First, look through what you've read and try and ask yourself, what is the author trying to get you to change your opinion about? What is the author trying to get you to learn? Two, what examples is the author using? Examples can be quotes, stories, data, citing of other experts, anything that is an example to prove the point, the main idea. And finally, how does this evidence, all the things listed in number 2 on the PowerPoint, how does that help support the author's opinion? How does that help the author make their point and try and get you to learn something or understand something better? So if a mindset about reading is you trying to figure out what the author is trying to get you to understand, some skills are some techniques that you can use to help you do that. So I suggest trying to do this with everything that you read. It will help you understand what you read in a more complete way and help you only have to read things maybe once, twice at the most, as opposed to rereading and rereading and rereading. So here's an example of some active reading. It's a printout of How Doctors Die. And one of the things you should note is no highlighting, lots of underlining, and most importantly, things written in the margins. Writing notes to yourself is super, super key. So first, as always, start by looking at the title. What does the title mean? What does it say? Take a guess. Think of the title as the author's promise. Whatever is in the title will somehow be related to what you read. Look for 2 types of writing strategies an author will use. We will call them examples and statements. All right? Note them in the margins, like say this is an example, this is a statement. Examples are stories, quotes, data, quotes from other people, things from the author's personal life. They will use lots of details, and they will always be something super specific. Next up are statements. Statements will be the author's ideas, their opinions, their claims, and maybe even a key term that they try to define. Okay, these would be their ideas, the author's ideas, what the own individual author is trying to present to you. So as you take notes from what you read, always note statements and ideas. Go ahead and take a guess. You're not going to get this right the first time, but by getting better at it, you'll start to notice, oh, this is an example, or oh, this is a statement. Finally, don't forget to note questions. All right, always try and think of a couple of questions you could ask the professor whenever you meet with them, either in class, face-to-face, or virtual setting, or even in an email or discussion board. All right, always try and find and create your own questions that you can ask. And finally, always read with a pen or pencil or some ability to take notes. All right, you want to take notes over everything you read in college. That will really, really help you understand things while giving you a great list and document to study for essays, quizzes, tests, whatever it may be. So let's talk a little bit about the main text that you will be summarizing in the next week or so. All right? It's an essay called How Doctors Die, written by Ken Murray. Here's kind of a fun picture of him. He's a retired family practice doctor and a retired professor of family medicine at the University of Southern California. Uh, the essay that you're reading deals particularly with end of life situations. So when he's talking about why people don't get treatment, he's talking about moments in somebody's life when there really isn't any other option. There's not an option to cure a disease. It's more just a matter of prolonging life. That's the situations he's talking about. All right. The quote here from Paula Spahn's interview with him for the New York Times talks about how he was really concerned about opening up and speaking about this topic, even though he knows, as he says, when we talk about end-of-life situations, it can be very uncomfortable because there's always a ton of emotion tied up with the person, the patient, the family, and the doctor. But even though these are emotional, hard things to talk about, Ken Murray believes we should talk about them. And that's what his essay was written for, to begin a discussion about how to deal with end-of-life situations. So, as we look at Murray's essay, I'm going to provide you two examples of what I want you to look for as you read it. One idea and one example. And then we'll kind of talk about how these ideas connect. And so with the two examples I provide in this PowerPoint, you should be able to go through the essay on your own and track out where the other ideas and other examples are. So let's look at this passage from page 1 of Murray's essay. All right. I've cut out a few sentences. That's where you see the 3 dots if you're reading it on the PowerPoint. I will not read over this to keep this video somewhat short, but I, as always, suggest you download the PowerPoint and look over it yourself. Maybe pause the video, take a time, read this section, and then come back. So, this is an example of an idea of Murray's essay. In fact, I would say this is the example of his main idea, his overall point and why he wrote the essay. All right? So, as we can see, all right, this is his idea because, as you notice, he's not really talking about a specific example. He's not talking about a specific piece of data or anything like that. He's making a broad, strong claim about why doctors die and how doctors die in terms of how it relates to other people. So essentially, if you look at the red here, if we said that the title of his essay is a promise, here's what would be the payoff to that promise in terms of a main idea. He's saying that what is unusual about doctors and the way doctors die compared to the rest of us is that doctors tend to, as he says, go gently in terms of forgoing unnecessary treatments in order to have a better quality of life, especially when dealing with maybe fatal or uncurable illnesses such as a very potentially strong cancer. You know, that's what you'd kind of think in your head. So what he's saying is that doctors die better is because they avoid these unnecessary treatments. They choose to have a better quality of life, spend time with their family, go through less pain. And that's their focus as opposed to taking something that might give them a 3-month diagnosis and try and get to 6 months, even if that 6 months would be filled with unnecessary and painful treatments. So this is really his key idea. This is what he's really trying to convince you, the reader, of. That this idea that doctors choosing to die by forgoing unnecessary medical treatment is a better way to approach end-of-life situations. And I think that's key to keep in your head as you read this and think about Murray's point. He's not saying that you should forgo treatment if you have something that has a huge chance of being cured. You know, I think then he would say, yes, go to the medical treatment, do what you can. He's really talking about really sad and painful moments when there's no curing or fixing this. There's only extending it. And he thinks extending life in these situations, especially if it causes painful treatments, is something that is unhealthy. So if that's an example of an idea in Murray's piece, let's look at an example of an example. All right. So on page 4, Murray ends the essay using the example of his cousin named Torch here in the essay. All right. This is a specific story using specific details about Torch's decisions. And that specificity, the fact that it is so strongly explaining details of one story, gives us a key markers that this is an example. So that he's using this example of Torch's life and Torch's decisions that Torch made at the end of his life as something that can help prove and explain his main point that you should forgo unnecessary and painful treatment. So highlighted in the red is sort of the main point of this example of Torch, is that even though Torch was not a doctor, Torch had decided that he wanted a quality of life, not just quantity. So this gets back to Torch forgo unnecessary treatments to choose a way to pass away that made him more comfortable, that allowed him to spend time with those that he loved. And this quality of life was way more important for Murray and Torch than giving more life at the end of this situation. So this is a really strong example. And this essay is filled with examples. Murray uses a lot of examples to prove this point. So now that we've looked at this example of Torch, all right, try and go ahead and find out if you can find any other examples and explain how they relate to the main idea that the way that doctors choose to die by foregoing unnecessary painful treatments is better than trying to extend life with painful and harmful treatments. See if you can find some examples and see how they relate back to that main idea. So as you're looking for main ideas and examples, let's look at how you might take some notes over those really briefly. First, important ideas, all right? Try and see if you can track something that you believe Murray is saying that is his opinion, all right? We looked at an example of his main idea, so you could practice some of your notes using the information from this lecture if you so choose. So as you're taking these notes, try and set them up in a way that foregrounds Murray's name as the author. You can use the examples provided on this PowerPoint in terms of setting up and explaining what Murray's most important parts are. As always, you can download this PowerPoint from our course Blackboard site. Next, you could find some supporting details and start to write how those supporting details are related to or connected to Murray's main idea. Okay, so again, here are some boilerplate examples that you can use as you begin to write and take notes over the essay, where you can articulate for yourself how some examples of maybe his cousin Charlie, his cousin Torch, one of his patients, and the many, many examples he uses in the essay relate to his main idea. That's the end of this lecture on summaries and how doctors die. We will discuss the essay in further depth in our virtual sessions.